Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm Johnny Kane. You are listening to Open Mic here on WJR Radio. Football season is underway. The NFL season kicking off tomorrow night. It's the Eagles and Cowboys. And then, of course, the Lions will get underway on Sunday with the big divisional matchup against the Packers in Green Bay. There is a sect of the population that really leans into fantasy football. And obviously fantasy football has been around for a while now. And I think most people understand what it is, what it's all about. I know several years ago, I'm probably going back 20 years or so. One of my first jobs out of school, we would do fantasy football. You do live drafts. I mean, guys were up on the whiteboards, had the markers, people were bringing in pizza, and it was a big deal. And, sometimes there's some money involved with how to get in, to be a part of the fantasy football season. But people take it very seriously. That it's no joke. And I imagine it's still today. I don't play fantasy football any longer. Working in sports, I'll say this. When I was working in local television for a number of years, 12 years, and when you're the sports guy and you're playing fantasy football, the expectation is you better be good, because if you're not, you're going to hear it from everybody else around the office. And it's been more than 10 years since I played fantasy. And I actually was able to somehow, some way, and ended up winning it the 1 year and then walked away. I said, it's not going to get any better than this. All I can go is down from here. So I said, okay, that's it. We're going to finish at the top. But honestly, people put so much time and effort into building their fantasy football rosters. And going back to one of the first ones I remember, there was a guy who was just placed on injured reserve. And anyway, you get to your first pick, so you make the decision. Well, do you go quarterback first, or do you go running back first, or do you go with an elite receiver? And depending on, what fantasy football league you're in and how the points are distributed, you got to make those tough decisions. But anyway, a guy was just placed on I wish I could remember who it was, but a guy was just placed on the IL like the week before. He got injured in training camp, and some guy took him, not realizing that he was unavailable, like for the first, 8-9 weeks of the season. And whoever the commissioner was said, "Hey, I'm sorry, you made the selection. We can't reverse it now." So anyway, but it is a very serious topic. I say serious in the way that I mean it. But with the NFL season getting underway, Carter Lutz, really good broadcaster, aspiring broadcaster at the University of Miami, he takes kind of a deeper dive into everything you need to know as we head into this football season. So without further ado, let's tap into what Carter Lutz has to say about fantasy football 2025.
As we have now hit September in the calendar, it's almost that time. People emptying their trunks, going out in their parking lots, ready to tailgate. People all across each state in the United States talking about their hometown team and how their team looks heading into the 2025 season. Yes, it is the NFL season, and we are kicking off shortly. But there's a group of people, and maybe a group isn't even the word to describe the mass amounts of people that are getting their draft boards out, getting their notes out, scrolling through their sleepers, and drafting their fantasy football teams. Fantasy football, a historic, extremely important part of the NFL season. It's something that's been going on since actually 1980, but really didn't pick up steam until the 2000s as the internet started to become more of a factor in our daily lives. And really, what is fantasy football? I think we all have a general idea of it. People are in a league. It's a good way to keep up. Me personally, I do it with my old high school buddies. We keep up every year talking about rule changes, talking about draft date. We all draft together. It's a fun thing that I think people are very familiar with, but it extends beyond that layer. There's different ways people can set up leagues. We've seen recently the adaptation of, instead of a 2 wide receiver league, there's 3 wide receivers that you have to draft and start each week. There's leagues where you have to have multiple quarterbacks, where you have to have multiple flex options, which is a skill position player. So the evolution of fantasy football is actually directly related to the evolution of the NFL. We've seen the NFL just continue to rise in this market of sports where sports is blowing up, football is continuing to blow up, more money in the game. Sports gambling has been legalized all across the United States, not in every state, but in most of them. So more and more exposure is being had in the NFL. With that, fantasy football is becoming even more of a bright spot in the league. Social media, for example, has seen a boom in fantasy football interaction. There's guys out there who are giving you specific players to draft, sleepers, a sleeper referred to as a guy who's a little bit under the radar, guys who can win leagues. There's so many different ways that people can follow fantasy football and take it to different levels and continue to have it be a part of their everyday lives. It's truly outstanding, and it speaks to the way the NFL just has control on so many people throughout the fall. It's September now. These leagues will be going on deep into December, January. So it's truly a mesmerizing product because of the power it has, the emotion it brings people, and the way you can follow it for months at a time and even into the offseason. Going back to the emotional aspect and why fantasy football is so prevalent, it really starts with the human being controlling the app, controlling his roster, becoming a general manager in his own eyes. And I think that's such a big reason why I love fantasy football is because we don't know what it's like to make decisions in an NFL team, obviously. I mean, we're fans of all of our separate teams. We watch them, make a decision, make a draft pick. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but you got to live with it. And in fantasy football, you get to control that for yourself and the continuity you have with your league when you make those decisions. For example, in a fantasy football draft, when you make your pick, you're not going to be picking for a long time. All the rest of the league's got to go around and take their guys. So what we see often in fantasy football drafts is what is called a reach. Going for a guy you think has the potential to not be there later, so you got to take him a little bit earlier than he was projected. That's a fun way to have fun in your fantasy football league, seeing who's going to be reached on, seeing who won't. And when they are, will it be a mistake? Will it not? Jumping to conclusions right at the draft is something a lot of people do in fantasy football, but you have to let the picks play out. So it's a long, grueling season. It's a commitment, but it's something that the casual fan can sit back, relax, and enjoy games that they might have not have cared about before. This is all leading to the emotional aspect. You're watching a team, and maybe it's a Raiders-Broncos game, and you're a fan of an East Coast squad. You might never really care about a game like that. But because you have the Raiders tight end and because you have the Broncos running back, you're locked into the game. You want to see every offensive possession. You want to see every play and how it's going to affect your personal team. So you can balance out that fandom of a specific team with your fantasy football team and have a lot of fun with it. It's an emotional aspect of the game that will not be going away anytime soon. It's only rising, and it's just a really great way to follow the season all year long. So as September just started in the gridiron, the football season looms behind us. Draft your fantasy teams, get your draft boards out, get your sleepers, and pick a couple winners so you can be happy as a fan and as a general manager this 2025 season.
All right, good stuff from Carter Lutz, again, SportsCaster.com contributor from the University of Miami, setting the table for everything you need to know about fantasy football season heading into the year. One thing that I'll say before we go to break, one thing that I know that I used to do is, you can read a ton of publications and see, who are the best guys available, where should I go here? But what I ended up doing, it's kind of like, you wager with your heart. You end up going with your favorite players from your favorite team. And next thing you know, you stockpiling a team, say might be overloaded with Detroit Lions or what have you. So, sometimes it's important to make sure that you canvass the entire landscape in the National Football League before you just go with the guys that and say, yeah, I think he's primed for a big year. Yeah, he's definitely primed for a big year. Next thing you know, you've got Jared Goff and all the skill position guys for the Lions defense, and then you say, hey, see what happens. But anyway, it is a fun time and certainly good camaraderie for those who do participate in fantasy football. It gives you something to talk about at the water cooler every Monday, no question about that. All right, when we come back, we're going to transition from the National Football League to college football, and not just college football, but college athletics in general, as we talk about name, image, likeness, and how that impacts not just the universities themselves, but the athletes, and how athletes can profit from name, image, likeness. Christy Dosh, author with a new book that came out earlier this summer, she'll be joining the program coming up next here on Open Mic.